What is the Equal Opportunity Act? Its law seeks to prohibit certain kinds of discrimination: race discrimination, disability discrimination, and even religion discrimination. But you know what's not covered by the law? Sexual orientation. And it could be a problem because, you see, there is no secret that some citizens in TNT are homophobic.
We will notice.
Alright, then illegal. But homosexuality and abortion is also illegal, and they are trying to make it legal now. So come on, man.
So who protects them?
Commonwealth champion Michelle Yahi has tied the knot. A few posted on Facebook as the sprinter and longtime girlfriend said their I do's.
Trinidad and Tobago has already accepted this, but not me. This is an abomination. No, we are not accepting their behavior. I would never accept this lifestyle, period.
The EUC recognizes itself as a human rights organization with the responsibility of protecting the rights of all human beings in this country. But not everyone is protected.
We do have some amendments, proposed amendments before the Attorney General for some time now. One of them, the most pertinent one for the moment, is that we have been asking for the definition of sex in our legislation to include sexual orientation, because that is a grave omission when that act was first passed in 2000, that the definition of sex specifically excludes sexual orientation.
The inclusion of sexual orientation into the Equal Opportunity Act has been the topic of debate for many years.
This omission has always been a bugbear. As a matter of fact, early in the life of this legislation, even before the agencies that have been, the organs, the bodies that have been created by the legislation came into operation, there was litigation which reached as far as the Privy Council on this vexed question of the omission of sexual orientation from the definition of sex. But it was not resolved.
On April 12, 2018, Justice Devendra Rampersad determined that the TNT's Bagri laws were unconstitutional. The LGBT community saw it as a step in the right direction. However, they stepped on many toes.
There have been complaints that have reached us, and we, well, of course, I'm not at liberty to speak to the particulars of any specific complaints that we have received. But we would be hampered in dealing with complaints on the basis of complaints of discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. Right now, if a person is discriminated against on the basis of sexual orientation by a state agency, they can bring a constitutional motion. But if one private citizen or private employer or private service provider or private educational institution discriminates against a person, then their redress would then have to be the Equal Opportunity Commission, and we are hampered.
Mrs. Sibaran Sweet says that what happened on April 12th is not uncommon.
The spate of discriminatory acts against the gay community that followed immediately after the judgment is something that you always expect when a situation is in flux, when something is trending, when people can bury something under the cover and pretend that it doesn't exist. You can live with your gay child, or you will pretend that your child is not gay. But then when now the thing hits the fan, you now want to come and, put your child out, or the employer wants to say, well, I don't want to offend my church, so I'm going to fire somebody who I knew was gay all along, who, I was happy to employ.
Mrs. Sibaran Sweets wants to encourage the LGBT community to continue their activism, as she says the EOC is in their corner.
There is one area in which perhaps we can provide a remedy, and that is in the area of offensive behavior. because our legislation says that if somebody is guilty of offensive behavior, then the affected person can make a complaint to the Equal Opportunity Commission. So offensive behavior, though it must be where somebody incites hatred or ridicule of a person or a class of persons in public, then they are guilty of, on the basis of the status, whether it is that they are gay or they belong to a certain religion or certain race. And so we can entertain complaints in the area of sexual orientation here, because the legislation here speaks of gender as opposed to sex, and there is not the restrictive limitation of that was applied to the word sex in the definition section of the Act, where the Act says sex does not include sexual orientation. But where in the section of the legislation, which I think is section 7 of the legislation, which says that offensive behavior can be complained of, the term gender is used without qualification. So there is a narrow window of ability to complain.
And she has a message for citizens of TNT.
We must be more vocal and courageous in condemning and opposing bigotry. We are not in a country of mob rule, or even indeed there are wrong thinking majorities, let me put it that way, and you cannot leave a question of an individual's fundamental right to be themselves to be decided by a majority, maybe a religious majority, that has a different thinking or has a different moral outlook.
Mrs. Sibaran-Sweet says people who are different need protection.
Mahatma Gandhi said, "The true measure of a society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable." After the break, we share research results. Welcome back. Earlier this month, I sat down with Luke Sennett, a member of the group Friends for Life TT. The group conducted a survey in 2017 highlighting the struggles that members of the LGBT community face. Take a look.
Friends for Life was an LGBT group that started, I think, in 1997. That's about 20 years ago. Well, 21 years ago this year. And they started back then because people were dying, gay men were dying of HIV. Well, one thing, of course, is that medications became available, and so people were dying, they were living. And when people began to live, you began to realize that there was a whole host of other concerns that persons have. So HIV does not stand alone. It's not the only people that are made vulnerable. They're made vulnerable because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. They're made vulnerable because of their HIV status, because maybe of where they live, their economic status, whether they're homeless or not, all these different kinds of ways. We realize that persons need interventions. We do now a therapy group that we run in cycles. The therapy group is all about healing from the trauma of homophobia. I think one of the things that we don't realize very often, because when you're just kind of existing and living on and treading on, you don't realize the impact that homophobia has on you. So if persons are being negative towards you on a daily basis, or sometimes hurting you on a daily basis, whether that's psychologically, physically, emotionally, financially, what that does is that creates a kind of traumatic effect referred to as endurance trauma or complex trauma, and that can affect how you live your life. The survey took 5 months, I think we did it over 5 months. We interviewed 87 LGBTQI persons. I think that for persons who might be middle class or who might have very stable jobs or making good money, let's say you have a degree or a postgrad degree, you can insulate yourself from homophobia. But that's not the majority of the population. A lot of people do not. They have to kind of move around in homophobic spaces. So people are experiencing violence or violations or some kind of homophobic threats, but they're just not reporting it. It would not get reported as somebody losing their job because they're gay. but really and truly, you were forced out of their job because of homophobia. We didn't really realize that there were going to be so many people who experience homophobia. So like 69% of persons said that they would experience some kind of homophobia, homophobic violence within their lifetime while they were in Trinidad. On one end, I had a client who he used to sneak away to go to gay parties. He was young, maybe 19 or something, from Malik. And was living with the grandmother. So the grandmother found out, and she complained. She told one of his uncles, and the uncles beat him really badly. And he ran away or something. He went to the police, and then the police kind of brought him back and said, you know what, listen, just go hit him. But it's a way that we don't appreciate how to intervene in domestic violence situations. Because let's say if it was a woman being beaten by her husband, would the reaction be, I need to take her back and leave her and tell your husband, well, go beat her again? The number one issue across the board was violence. And so I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that persons living in this country, even though very many heterosexuals kind of go, well, I don't know, gay people are fine, that gay guy is just walking around, nobody's beating him. But that does not mean that people are not experiencing violence in other spaces in their life.
Thank you, Luke Sinnott. In late 2017, a survey was conducted by the group Friends for Life TT. They titled it, Not a Straight Thing. A total of 87 people were surveyed, and all people surveyed said that they were victims of violence or knew someone that was a victim of violence at least one time in their lifetime. The violence affected them in many ways, including bringing on bouts of depression, suicidal thoughts, sadness, and anger because of the difficulties and the stigma. The survey also showed that 23% finished as far as high school, and while most were employed, 39% were discriminated on the job. The discrimination included denial of promotions, pressure to leave, and lower pay grades or lower wages. Approximately 62% said that they were victims of violence by their own family members, and 65% said that their sexual orientation spoiled their family relationships. They were abused physically and verbally, and they were also excluded from important family gatherings. The study showed that 65% of respondents believed that their gender identity and sexual orientation negatively affected their family relationships, while Dr. Khadija Khan believes that the Stronger Families Project can help relatives cope with and understand their LGBT family member.
Strongest risk factors, and so this initiative that we're doing with Silver Lining is an attempt to combat that, to have a safe space for parents to express their concerns. It is not a place of judgment. We're not trying to tell parents what they should and shouldn't do. We're trying to explore what are some of the challenges that they face, and for them to explore it with other parents so they can hear how other parents have dealt with it. I want to establish that it's okay for families to not understand everything. It is okay for a parent to not be sure, to have concerns or to have doubts. But as with any parent and with any child, the love for your child should be the tantamount priority. I think one of the first things that a lot of parents echoed was it something they did? So could they have done something differently for their child to not to be gay or to be straight? And the answer to that is no. Being homosexual, being gay, being LGBT is not a choice. It is not a choice. Sexual orientation is not a choice. Children are born that way. People are born that way. A lot of parents actually were worried just about their extended families. So how would their siblings, cousins, aunts, grandparents react? Would they be judged? Would they be ostracized? Would they be accepted? So for many parents, it was an issue of whether they should keep it a secret. The first one is acceptance, to accept the reality and not live in false hope that is never going to happen. So for example, one parent said, she just kept hoping and waiting that her son would bring home a girl. And so we had to explore that and say, how likely do you think that is to happen? It's never going to happen. So part of it is accepting the reality for what it is, and then being open in little steps. The discomfort that parents feel is the same discomfort that people have in general with the LGBT community, that it seems unfamiliar. We have so many avenues telling us that this is something wrong. So it presents a conflict to parents. That should I endorse this? If I endorse this and people say it's wrong, what does that say about me? Am I going to be blamed? Am I encouraging my child into something that's not good for them? We need to take a step back, and we need to change the discourse on a national level, a societal level, that this is a natural expression of sexual orientation, that this is just one other variant in identity. If we talk more about it and we normalize it, then trying to navigate some of these challenges will be easier for parents.
We take a quick break, and when we come
March, they preach, and they stick to their beliefs, but they love just the same.
People must not be treated bad and unfairly. They must be treated equal. Whether you're gay, whether you're homosexual, whether you're rich, you're poor, whether you're Christian or non-Christian.
Pastor Keith Ramdas believes that members of the LGBT community deserve a place in society and should not be abused for their choices.
The arrogance of the few that shows that disrespect and behave that way, I think it is wrong. I go to restaurants and they serve me. I tip them well. I show love and I show kindness. I don't treat them like if they're bad. So I think, and they're looking for that sense of somebody loving them.
Pastor Ramdas even had a message for citizens of this country.
He who have no sin cast the first stone.
Before we leave you, let's take a look at this evening's main headlines.
Satmaraj stands behind the decision to ban a trainee teacher from wearing a hijab at school. The Education Ministry says it is investigating the matter.
And in sport, TNT's ladies continue to cruise in CONCACAF qualifying. They dust aside Dominic.
There's a quote by Voltaire that says, "No snowflake in an avalanche ever feels responsible." Let's not be the reason a member of the LGBT community harms themselves or feels less than the human being that they are. Look, you may not agree with their lifestyle, but do you agree with them being abused?